You're listening to the House of Bricks podcast, where entrepreneurs and veterans share the real stories of testing, failing, learning, and growing, brick by brick and vet by vet. Brought to you by Sintra Mortgage. And now, here's your host, 7-time entrepreneur, ex-pro basketball player, and team co-owner, man of faith, and founder of the House of Bricks, Adam House Sr.
Hey, what's up, everybody? So I hope you're having a great day. And I'm very excited because we are resurrecting the House of Bricks podcast. So yes, we are live here, but we took a little 6-month hiatus, too many things going on, and then focusing on LinkedIn live events, which have been extremely powerful and effective. But at least once a month, someone says to me, when are you going to roll out the House of Bricks podcast again? So this is back in action, and I wouldn't pick a better guest to have on today. And if I look like I'm sweating, I am, because it's 100 degrees here in Michigan. Our office is all glass. I'm in a fishbowl and we have no air conditioning. Now in the summer, we don't have AC, but this is startup life and this is what we do. So you probably see my new shirt if you're watching. We've come out with some brick by brick apparel, getting asked in the gym, where'd you get that? So really looking forward to getting our name out there about us. It's about how we can inspire other people through the brick by brick mentality, turning obstacles into stepping stones. There is no straight path to the top. It's really that adversity that builds resilience. The resilience is what builds strength, and the strength is what builds great outcomes. So glad everyone's joining us today, coming off an amazing weekend. If you don't follow us on social media, you should, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere it can be. We're posting, and you've probably seen some of this what the truck thing that I'm talking about. And typical Adam House fashion, I have this green Raptor, looks like a sniper, should be driving it. However, only shot 3 guns in my life, 2 BB guns in the Cub Scouts, and I think a handgun with my father-in-law. And so I posted about this the other day. It is very important to follow instruction, but even more important, you have to ask the person or yourself, is the instruction I am following the correct one? So I had Josh Kent, a veteran in our community. He's the driver of What the Truck, Black Ops Green Raptor, and he was helping my son. So I was like, all right, I'd rather have him help my son who's 12 years old. And there was another guy, he was a veteran, very skilled sniper as well, but there's a difference between being a sniper and a teacher. So I get right in there and I said, start at 0. I know nothing. So line up, put your eye on the target. I've watched too many movies, put my eye right on the scope, fire 3 practice rounds, no ammunition, loads one in, and you can already see where this is going. I put my eye on the scope. Fortunately, I had protective wear on, and this thing had kickback like Mike Tyson. So what I learned is I will never do that again. But what I also learned is I can take a freaking punch. I stayed in there, took it, and, have a scar to prove it. So it's right there, little crack in the nose, but that never hurt anybody. The truck, I'm posting about it all the time. It's not just a vehicle. It is a vehicle that is going to change lives and how veterans are treated every day, right? We have Veterans Day. Every day is Veterans Day. And there's a lot of awareness that we're trying to raise through this truck, because up to 50 veterans a day take their own life. And why is that? Because they didn't make that phone call, that one person that may have helped them. So this truck on the road has our branding on it. And when you see it, think about veterans, it may take you reaching out. I know me personally, I'm the last person to reach out. And when I do, it's oftentimes almost too late. So it's the power of community, a power of being on the same frequency and a mission. So today's guest, Tim Jensen, he's a Marine Corps veteran and a leader in the business community and advocacy for the veteran community. He was born in Chicago, Illinois. He serves as the chief brand officer of Grunt Style, which is a fast-growing e-commerce and retail patriotic brand. It's probably one of the fastest growing in the country. So he's also the chairman of the Grunt Style Foundation, hosts several podcasts that are veteran-focused. And during his service in the Marine Corps, Tim served as an amphibious assault vehicle crewman, then an infantryman, and was deployed in Iraq in September 2004. He participated in over 200 combat patrols in the extremely violent Northern Babel province and was awarded a Combat Action Ribbon and a second award Navy Achievement Medal with Combat Valor Device. His unit was awarded the Naval Unit Citation for Action in Combat. So, Tim, I want to welcome you to the House of Bricks. And that's an impressive resume. Paul did that on purpose, threw a bunch of big words in there to try to trip me up, but I think I got most of it. Welcome to the House of Bricks.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Adam. And, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to chat with you and talk about all the things that Grunt Style is doing in the veteran community and, a little bit about our business.
Yeah. And you and I have connected a couple times before, and I really love the story and like what the brand's really about. Are there any highlights that you want to talk about as we kick this off?
I've been in this veteran space for going on 13, 14 years now. And I never would have imagined that I would find myself in this role, in this position of influence within the veteran community. I never would have imagined Grunt Style would be in the position of having this type of influence. This company is involved in writing legislation that is getting passed and influencing veterans' lives across the country in so many different ways. Here we are, and I've built an incredible group of individuals around me, really doing something that's different and unique.
So we all have kind of that moment, and I've sat where you are now many times in my career, having started now 7 companies, right? When you're in the beginning, you never think you'll get to where you are when you're looking back. What was kind of the big moment that you really knew you had something? You started this business, you're testing, failing, learning, and growing. Was there a failure maybe that you had that was a catalyst? Because I look back and there's kind of that one thing maybe you did wrong or failed in, you learned, and then it was just like set you off to the races.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of failure, right? I think any entrepreneur that is successful will tell you that they have failed more than they've ever been successful. Success is one thing.
Right.
Failure is all the things to make that one thing work. Over the years, I've seen it over and over again. This company was started by a former drill sergeant in the Army, my business partner, Daniel Ulrich, with the idea of taking the fundamentals and values that were imprinted upon us in our military time to the civilian space. What better way of doing that than through t-shirts and apparel? So that's where the real idea came from, was this expression of pride in self, pride in military, pride in country. And during that time period, 2009, we're in the thick of the global war on terrorism. We're about 8-9 years into that. And there's really no brand that exists in the United States at that time that represented the GWAT individual or just the American military individual. There was Ranger Up, which is a very fantastic brand. I know the owner very well, Nick Pachano. However, it's very niched, right? Not a lot of Rangers, but there are a lot of American military personnel. So when we came in, we filled that void and started speaking directly to that GWAT individual, which was a bit different than previous iterations of the American military. The Gen Xer is a very unique person, and they like to be marketed a very unique way. We found how to do that very effectively. But there was a lot of failure that got us to the point that we connected, finally made that $1 million. The company was operating for almost 5 years before it made the first $1 million. A lot of failure that comes with that. The thing with all businesses is you have to be okay and comfortable with the idea of, I will fail more often than I will ever be successful.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched that highlight video before we go live, and I'm like, that was pretty much all the highlights over 30 years. So it was only a minute long video.
Right.
People are like, oh, you started 7 companies. I was like, yeah, I can get through all the highlights in less than 3 minutes.
I've forgotten more than I've done in this company than anything I can remember in such a short period of time. But it's crazy. Once you're involved in something that you're passionate about, like everything kind of just bleeds away, and it's something more than just a job, right? It's like your life at that point.
Yeah, it is. And you never know when the idea is going to happen, right? You just have to test different things. I've tested hundreds of things here in the House of Bricks. And sometimes people are like, oh, you're lacking focus. It's like, no, I'm trying new things.
Okay.
And when I find the thing, I know it's the thing. So I started to tell the story of how I came up with What the Truck, right? So I'm driving around. I live in Birmingham, which is one of the nicest cities in Michigan. I don't own a gun. I don't have a horse, and I don't like country music. Why do I have a truck? And so I was like, this truck's amazing. Everywhere I go, people are like, oh, that's the sickest truck I've ever seen. So I'm thinking, I'll put this thing on Facebook. It'll be gone in a minute. So 2 weeks go by, went to a bunch of dealerships. Of course, they want to offer you $30,000, less than it's worth. They don't give you any credit for the upgrades. And so I wake up on a Saturday and I was like, what the truck? And I was like, wait a minute, what the truck? A veteran should be driving this truck. And so we have veterans in our community in the House of Bricks. That's one of our core pillars of Bricks, is to help them transition from the battlefield to the boardroom. Because when you're in the service, you're being told what to do every single day. Do this, be here, be here, be here. And you get out and no one's telling you what to do. And it's lonely, right? In those first 30, 60 days, you need a tribe. Where's your unit? Where's your team? And so we want to just be that place where they can come in, and it's not handouts, they're hand ups. Veterans have pride. They have skills that most civilians don't have. And if they can make that transition like you have, you can build incredible businesses. And so I called the veteran and he was like, I don't want a Raptor, sell it, and I'll give the team to my unit. Like typical veteran fashion. Like, dude, it's not a new one. Okay. And it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about this vehicle being a symbol of how we can support and inspire and be a community for veterans. So calls you back a couple days later. He's like, I'm it. So 2 weeks later, flies to Detroit, gets the truck, picked him up at the airport. It was amazing. And the community, everywhere we went, people got behind it. Everyone wants to support veterans, but they really don't know how to do it other than donating to this or that. But people want to feel some impact as well. So it's a movement. We're hoping it goes wild. I'm actually flying down to Miami. He's going down to the Keys this next weekend. My best friend's a police officer at the Miami Beach Police Department. So he's going to swing by the department. So it's awesome. But for you personally, you want to talk a little bit about your time in the service and then how you were able to make that transition? Because very few veterans do, right? Like we see the ones like you that now have built something of impact, but what was it like with your time in the service and then that transition period?
Yeah, it's very important, right? Because every veteran's transition from active duty, reserve, National Guard is going to be different, right? And it's really based on where they're going back. So myself, I'm like every other American. I grew up, middle America, a divorced home. My parents were divorced by the time I was 11 years old. Typical story. I joined the military because my grandfather, there were some influences from him and his World War II background, but mostly it was like get out of where I was at. I wanted to try something new. It wasn't college material. I had no interest in doing that. Not to say I wasn't a good student, right? I was pretty clever, pretty smart, but school is not for me. So I joined the Marine Corps at 16 years old in a delayed entry program and ended up in boot camp right before my 18th birthday, July of 1997. And boy, was that a rude awakening. Everything that I expected it to be was by a factor of 10 worse. I was preparing myself with a Full Metal Jacket and watching that show almost every day before I went to boot camp.
That's what I learned to shoot for that movie.
My first 4 years in the Marine Corps were pretty uneventful. I was an Amtracker. I was in Camp Pendleton, and I was in Camp Lejeune. I got out. My family at the time was living in North Carolina. They'd all moved back to Chicago. So I displaced back to Chicago, became a union carpenter. 9/11 happens, right? I got out in April when 9/11 happens. I'm a carpenter in the city and we're going to war and I'm not a Marine anymore. So I started trying to find ways of getting back into the Marine Corps and found a reserve unit in the city of Chicago, got in with their I&I staff, found out that the unit was going to be activated for deployment to Iraq and tried to get onto that whole thing. Learned that I wasn't an infantryman and the unit was an infantry unit and they wouldn't take any non-infantry personnel into that unit. So I made a deal to OJT, which is on the job train, for an additional MOS with the 11 infantryman designator. I earned that and our pre-workups and deployed to Iraq as an infantry squad leader. I had a lot of fun doing that. I was in Iraq from September 2004 to April 2005. I was there for the first Iraqi national election, which I'm extraordinarily proud about. And we did a lot of good work there. We heard all the bad people, as many as we could, and, made I think a great impression to the locals there on what Americans bring to the equation or any circumstance. And I think that, we left them with a great impression. But, so it was a little over 8 years, some broke time in between that. But, I enjoyed it all. I would have done it a lot more, or I would have stayed in a lot longer. But the following deployment from that one was FOB security, and that's not my bag.
Well, you mentioned your grandfather, so we share that same connection, right? The greatest generation in history, that baby boom, culture or generation. But I keep his picture on my desk here. He was just a huge impact in my life. Never really cared about fame, just wanted to serve his country.
Yeah.
So he's in the Army, was a fireman, postman, but we always had a positive attitude, spoke life into me and said, watch out for Adam. He's a sleeper. And he was damn right. So I ended up, you want to talk about that 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is from when you left the service, that transition. What were some of the challenges that you faced and what could have helped you at that time?
Yeah, the first time that I left the military, I think it was fine. I transitioned pretty effectively. I got into a job really quickly, that union carpenter job. I think I was set pretty well. I think my second time coming out of the military was a little bit different. And it was a lot to do with the combat experiences. The Marine Corps does a really good job of getting you prepared to go out and do some very dangerous and lethal things, right? I felt confident that they gave me everything I needed to do to go kill the enemy. But I don't think that they gave me enough of what I needed to leave after having completed all those things, right? Leaving active duty with no combat deployments is one thing, but leaving after a very heavy combat deployment where there's a bunch of loss and a lot of circumstance around that, I don't think we were really well positioned for that. So when I came home from my second deployment, my life kind of spun out of control. I had a son that was born right before I left. So I didn't, I spent a year really not knowing my son and not having a relationship with that. And I came back and I was being asked to be a father, a nurturer, right? And I just spent the last year training to be a destroyer and then 6 months executing that plan and destroying lives. To come back and then raise a child and be completely separated from that lifestyle, that was a pretty tough moment for me. And, I started to lose my way. I'm not very proud of some of the things that I got myself into: philandering, alcoholism, drugs, really bad, destructive behavior. I wanted to die. I worked during the day. I bounced at one of the most violent biker bars on the south side of Chicago at night, just hoping that I would get my ass kicked and that I didn't have to wake up and do it again tomorrow. All the while managing a broken marriage, my children, I lost a lot of things during that time period. But I also learned a lot about myself as well. I learned the resiliency that I'm capable of. I learned that I do have a lot of discipline, contrary to my own belief at that time, and that I had something left to do, even as suicidal as I was at that time period. There's a documentary I put out in 2016 that really tells that story. It's called The Bullet, and it's on Amazon. I don't recommend it. It's a gut wrencher.
I was just writing it down. I'll be fine.
Yeah, it was a very dark period for about 3 to 4 years. I'm thankful that I made it out. I'm thankful that I was able to break away from the medication that they had me on. I'm thankful that I was able to repair a lot of the relationships that I destroyed, mostly with my ex-wife and my children. My ex-wife lives less than a mile away from me, and she came from Chicago. When I told her I was moving to San Antonio, she followed along. I've been really blessed, considering all the things that have occurred to me post-combat, that I've really had a great network of people, friends and loved ones. Those loved ones I really pushed far away from me. They stayed and really tried to make the best of it, and I'm really thankful for that.
So we have a pretty big audience, right, on various social media channels. If there's a veteran listening now that maybe some of the things you're saying you were going through is having those, like, how did you get out of that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. That's one of the bigger issues that I work on with the Grunt Style Foundation today is the overprescribing of psychotropics within the veteran community. Veteran suicide is the leading killer of veterans today, right? Over 156,000 veterans have taken their lives over the last 20 years. Over $500 million this year, my friends, will be spent on veteran suicide, and that will not save one life. That's the hard data of it all. And, what we're learning is it has a lot to do with these psychotropics and the overprescribing of it. My story is just one of many along that path. I was prescribed trazodone, Zoloft, Paxil. I was on this cocktail for a period of time, and it was having some significant impacts on my mental health to the point where it's driving me into isolation and destructive behaviors. Did not have a connection with reality. What really broke me from the medication, I was coming home from work one day, the city of Chicago, and I lived 23 miles away from the city at that time, in a town called Romeoville on the southwest side. It's a straight shot. You take the double nickel all the way out of the city, right into Romeoville. You stay on one road. Well, I ended up finding myself 99 miles away from my house in Portage, Indiana, completely the opposite direction of where I needed to go, and came to on the side of the expressway, not knowing how I got there. and just had a complete of the time from when I took my medicine to the reaction. So the question is, well, why did you take your medicine in the afternoon? Well, that's the way that they prescribe these things. The way the medication works, you have to take it a couple hours prior to it being effective. I was doing the same thing. My body metastasized a little bit faster that day or whatever the case may be. And I found myself in this acute situation. At that point, I really determined that I need to get off this medication. This was prior to a suicidal event where I really wanted to take my life. But, it was that point that made the determination that I had to get off this medicine and began a relationship with cannabis. And really, cannabis has been something that I've been using since that moment to today. And I've been free from psychotropics. I've been much better in my own mental health. Psychedelics has done more for me than psychotropics has ever done in my relationships with them. And I feel like I've been on a much better path.
So I talk a lot about the parallels between sports and business, just being an athlete, but starting a business is a battlefield. Even if you're not a veteran, there's still a lot of collateral damage when you're building a business. You are the business. You're eating, sleeping, living, and breathing it. Everything weighs on you. I've had some very dark and challenging times as well. Everyone just sees the highlights. Look how happy Adam is on social media. And then you turn it off. Sometimes I watch my reels and I'm like, I don't even know if that's me because I feel in the darkest place I've ever been. So the point is that we can't waste our time in the valley because that is when you learn the most out yourself. You don't learn anything by winning. Success is a horrible teacher, Steve Jobs says, right? I haven't learned anything from when I sold my company. Okay, great. Now it's on to the next thing, but I learn in the process and the journey. I encourage everyone. I have stacks and stacks of journals just of getting your thoughts out. I'm not a therapist or claim to be one, but just getting it from your mind to paper. And then it's at least out of your head.
Yeah.
And the next thing you want to do is go back and read them because 90% of what we worry about or think about never happens. And so it trains you to realize your mind can play tricks on you. We're fed negative media all the time, negative, comparing to others.
Sure.
Journals are a lifeline to me. I'm a guy, like if I go to a networking event, I have to come home and sit in the closet for 3 hours because it just like literally drains me. I don't remember anyone's name. I don't know how many kids they have. I'm just like, all that talking. I'm like, I got to go into a closet and just be by myself. So I'm like a introvert in that way, but do like doing what I'm doing. Any networking events just wear me out. But in those times, being alone with yourself is kind of the toughest thing for people to do. And it can be really powerful, but it can also be really dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
So I tell people like, you just need a friend. And, if you're going through a hard time, still get time alone, but someone that's checking in on you and everyone says they want to help you. Oh, I got you, dude. I got you. And then maybe one person actually cares, right?
Yeah.
Or they got their own lives, their own issues. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with the House of Bricks community is just a free newsletter, a connection point for veterans. And again, it's not just a place to connect. It's a place to learn and grow. We have investors in our community, venture capitalists, CEOs, early stage founders. I agree with that, but then you also end up with all the same people in the community. Like if everyone's a veteran, you're all veterans and 99% of the problems, they're all the same. So having a venture capitalist in there and you have a business idea, he likes a business idea, maybe you get funding, or you're a top CEO and you want to mentor a veteran with a business idea, like that relationship's there.
It's good branding.
Getting into, I don't think I had a clear answer.
I think it's very important for young entrepreneurs in general is that with all that stress, it's lonely at the top. We don't have a lot of resources or people in your network that have shared experiences of building a business at the point in time that you're at. So it's very easy to get lost in your own thoughts, and especially because of the amount of interfacing that we have to do at that level, it's easy for us to get lost in our own thoughts, to start ruminating and creating our own sense of paranoia. And that own sense of paranoia then leads into imposter syndrome. And then the next thing you know, you're questioning all the things that you're doing and you've given yourself the ips, the deadly ips, right? So you got to be very careful with that, right? And finding those ways of getting the stuff that's going on up here out. right? So if
Mhm.
it stays up here and it locks up here, then you're stuck in that OODA loop. And to your point, it's very dangerous, right? So, just doing exercises of just journaling is great ways of clearing the mind and getting, all this stuff kind of flushed out. So you're not sitting there and just cycling on it or beating an idea into oblivion or whatever the case may be. Like, writing is probably one of the best exercises of expression and clearing thought because you're going through the process of the mechanical skills. They're all, frontal cortex actions, and it's extraordinarily healthy.
Yeah. Just to narrow this one question, what is the one thing you could have had that would have helped you sooner?
One thing, mindset, I guess, like, because, like nothing would have changed if I would have had a mentor, right? That, would have accelerated things, maybe, but then I would have X'd out a massive amount of failures that taught me so many things.
Mhm.
I think my mindset during the beginning processes in the first 4 or 5 years, if I still had that mindset today, I think we would be in a different place, right? 'Cause as a organization gets older, you lose some of that scrappiness. You lose some of that entrepreneurial risk taking, and you kind of slow down your agility, and you're no longer able to spin on a nickel. Now you're spinning on a quarter, right? And it takes a little bit longer to move an organization. So it's not necessarily what I would have done differently. It's what would I have taken from the past and applied to today. I think the mindset that I'm trying to put myself back into is for the next stage of my company's growth, I need to bring back some of that scrappy entrepreneurial mindset back into my business to create and push evolution and innovating change.
Yeah, and one of the big things that we talk about, right, is mindset, but it's also when you're not in a good place and you don't know what to do, and they're very tough to develop when you're
Yeah.
valley, right? So, what I see is just having a connection to a community mind or wherever, just be connected somewhere that's growth oriented, right? And you'll be around people on a frequency that you want to be on.
Yeah, I read a lot of books, reader. And, in psychology in general, there's this idea that you are a product of the 5 people that you surround yourself, right? So if you're surrounding yourself with losers, you're going to be a loser. If you're surrounding yourself with high performers, likelihood you're going to be a high performer.
And I tell them I have 4 boys, 18, 16, 15, and 12 now. And I tell them, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you who you are.
Yeah.
That is just a fact. Unfortunately, they all play sports. So they have that drive, they have that competitiveness, but there's always that one friend that sneaks in that I'm like, bro, that ain't it. So, but yeah, being around great people that are on the right frequency. We talk about testing, failing, learning, and growing. We actually have a separate show for that. But like, as you look back in the past, like what are 2 or 3 experiences that didn't go as planned?
Yeah, yeah. I would say the first one was probably my biggest failure. And that's, years ago, 2018, 2019, Grunt Style, we made a decision that we wanted to start our own American manufacturing. And we set ourselves a pretty aggressive state for that. My partner at the time challenged me. He's like, Tim, I don't think you can stand up a manufacturing business in less than 60 days. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, on the 60th day, I don't think you'll be able to have a product that we can take to market and sell.
But he can.
Right. And so at that time, I knew nothing, right? Just like I knew nothing about screen printing when I was asked to stand up a screen printing business. But, I learned it and I figured it out just like this. I went to the professionals. I figured it out, set up a manufacturing shop here in San Antonio. I learned that the Levi's plant that employed a significant amount of people here never displaced. They're still living here. So started putting out information and messaging into the local San Antonio area to bring those people out. And, next thing I know, I've got a staff of 30 individuals, mostly from the old Levi plant. The barrier to learning was nil, right? Because they all had those skills. They just needed to be sharpened up, right? And most of them were still doing that stuff for other companies. So we started testing and we started making, and I'm buying linen from rolls, dyeing it and having it brought back to us in rolls. We're unrolling it, cutting it, putting templates on it, stitching it all together, putting buttons, all the parts and pieces to finishing. And I produced the first Grunt Style marketable long sleeve shirt. And I was quite proud about it. That was a turning point of our business. We stood up an American manufacturing using all American employees. And that was going really well. And then we hit some really bad cash positions coming into 2019. and we had to shut the whole thing down. That was probably in my total career, the worst part that I had to ever go through as a leader. And, I've lost lives as a Marine leader in combat, but we knew what we were going into. We knew that lives were going to be lost. I think this was a little bit different for me in a learning situation of having to lay off an entire division of people that I just stood up and I was so overly proud of and screaming from the rooftops that we were able to accomplish this thing. And then less than 60 days later, had to shut the whole business down. So the whole life cycle of that thing was like 6 to 9 months. That was a very tough situation for me, and it still makes me sad to this day.
So I've, over the last 12 months, probably talked to 600 founders, and I saw some of the notes you submitted in preparation for the show, and I laughed. You're like, we ran out of money. Like every time. You're not a real founder if you haven't run out of money. So I remember I had my health analytics business and our burn rate was like $100,000 a month. And this guy was going to invest 5 million Series B round, kept putting it off. We were down to zero in the bank account on Wednesday and had an $80,000 payroll.
You haven't lived unless you had to scrap for payroll.
Yeah, that's it. That's when you become a founder. And the guy wired in $5 million on Thursday, did payroll Friday, and that company ended up going public. But no one sees that. They see the press release of Qualmetrics closes $5 million Series B funding round. And was like, you must have been so. I was like, I'm barely alive. When it hit, it wasn't excitement. It was just a big relief. So tell us, we kind of have a story of you personally, the business. Where is Grunt Style today? And what's your vision now? Because even like you said, when you reach different levels in business, there's like arbitrary revenue numbers that I've just seen as like a pattern. 0 to a million, million to 5 million is your next bucket, 5 to 10, 10 to 25. Those are kind of the jumps that I see. But where is Grunt Style today? And what is your vision for it, 5 years from now? Where do you want this to be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Today, Grunt Style is the largest veteran patriotic apparel provider in the entire country, hands down, bar none, full stop. And I don't think that there's anyone that's even close to us in providing a value quality product as well as a community rich as what Grunt Style has produced over the years. We're coming up on 6 million social media followers, all in on a push of a button. I could speak to 12 to 13 million people within our profiles. We have a substantial audience that this company has put together over the years. Why? Because we built a very authentic relationship with the end user. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there was really nobody in the space when we came in, right? And it was for the taking. And I like to make metaphors of it or similes or examples of like saying, hey, it was like the early 18, and it was the gold rush. Like everybody's racing to California, right? Well, we were racing across with no opposition in front of us. And what we ended up doing is we started showing the veteran space, like, hey guys, like, look at this can be done, right? Look what is possible. And from there, you start seeing all these other brands pop up, Nine Line, Black Rifle Coffee, yada, 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 list is long. But there's some of those that have done well. Black Rifle Coffee Company has gone public, right? And then you got other companies out there that are just trying to fight for the space that we've already won. So, I think the brand is in a very great spot to continue to deliver quality premium product to a very bought in audience. We continue to build that community bigger and bigger every year, right? We say here at Grunt Style, if you are a patriot, if you love patriotism, if you are willing to die for your country, then we have a tent for you. Come party with us here at Grunt Style, because that's where all the fun is at. That's where Americana is happening. Where do I see the company in 5 years? Well, I hope to see it continuing to be the leader in veteran patriotic apparel. Right. We're right now a $130 million business, right? I think in 3 years, we will be a $250 million business because the growth is showing that direction. I hope that the Grunt Style Foundation, which is such a pivotal part of our organization, honestly, Adam, if I could be completely honest with you, I hope in 5 years that I've shut down the Grunt Style Foundation because we've achieved all its mission objectives. We've reduced veteran suicide. We expanded veteran healthcare to capture all the exotic cancers that are killing the GWAT cohort, which we did with the PACT Act. And, we want to bring alternative modalities to therapy. So, psychedelics and hyperbaric chamber therapy. If I can achieve all those things in the next couple of years, I'll shut down the foundations. We've achieved all of our objectives. So, we are a business of action here to build community and really put a light to the global war on terror veteran who came out of middle America, USA, to stand up and fight for what they believed in at a time where the world was upside down and we were caught in the middle of religious war that we've never expected. So I think those Americans need to be recognized and never forgotten. It was the longest war of our history as a country. And some of the greatest Americans, I believe, the second greatest generation is within this cohort. So that's where I think that where we are today and where we're going in the future. And I ask all of your listeners to join us for that journey and bring us along with you as you're going along your own patriotic journey.
Yeah, everyone should. And I, first of all, love the mission, what you're doing. Secondly, there's a lot of great missions out there, but they have a terrible business. That is not you. So a lot of places people donate to, they have no clue where the money's going, how it's being used. But the more I learn, the more I shake my head. Like I just learned that they have to pay for their own uniforms in the service. Or a guy that got injured and the Army wouldn't release him so he could get a job. Then he was going to lose his house. And so he had to get a side job like cutting grass. When people leave my company, I treat them better than that. And maybe even if they've been here 6 months, like you try to help them transition and get them another job. It's just, you're either in or out. And then when you're out, it's just like you're out on your own. And what was the number you said? How much do we spend on veteran suicide prevention right now?
Yes. This year in 2025, the Veterans Health Administration will spend over $577 million on suicide prevention programming. That's just the suicide prevention programming. That, the total line item budget for the VA for 2025 is something to the tune of $3 billion.
And you don't think it's making an impact?
Not one bit. February 28th, I put a press release out challenging the new Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Doug Collins, in a very positive way, to investigate the Department of Veterans Affairs, right? In the last 20 years, we've spent over $1 trillion on suicide prevention. Where is all the money going? And why are we not seeing a reduction in, why is the numbers not going this direction? We're seeing them go this direction. Last year was like deaths by suicide in the veteran community. This year, they're anticipating over 6,400. So we're not going down. That money is not doing anything. There's 40,000 veteran service organizations in the United States that all say that they're geared toward veteran suicide. What the hell are they doing?
Right. Yeah. I'm with you. And like I said, the more I get into it, and there's a lot of organizations out there that claim to help veterans, but it's like all charitable organizations. You dig in a little bit and the numbers don't add up. And we all know that prescriptions are not the answer. They have to know that. If I know that, how come they're not making a change? It actually costs less to do it the right way than it does the way they're doing it.
Think about this. This is not a new problem for the VA and what's happening in the cohort, right? So there's about 18.5 million veterans in the United States. The VA is administering healthcare to about 48% of that number. So that's just short of 9 million, right? Of that 9 million that's currently receiving care in the VHA, here's a startling number for you. Almost 70% of them are being prescribed psychotropic medicines. 70%. And we are scratching our heads here every day wondering why the suicide epidemic is so high. When we are prescribing veterans who are already suicidal, who are coming to the VA, talking to these healthcare providers saying, hey, I am showing suicidal tendencies. I need to get some help. What is the first thing that we're doing to them? We are prescribing them medicine that increases their suicidal ideations. That is absurd. And it is happening every single day. I have 3 employees that in the last 60 days have come to me and said, Tim, does it seem strange to you that I went to the VA because I needed some help in a mental health circumstance? And the first thing that they want to give me was a prescription for Klonopin. I was like, absolutely. And I hope that you're not taking that medicine. And they're not.
But if you weren't there, they would. If you weren't there, they would be, right?
Maybe for the information that we're sharing. And that's the most important part here is I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor. But, I know I was on this medicine. I know what it did to me. I know that what it's done to several of my friends that are no longer with us, that have taken their lives. I've seen what it's done to umpteen number of people. I know that 70% of the veterans in the administration are on this stuff, but we don't want to put a finger and say, well, that's the problem. It wasn't but 10, 15 years ago, the same numbers were being present in the opioid crisis in the veteran community. 68% of the veterans in the VHA were addicted to opioids. So what did they do? Well, they changed their opioid policies and strategies and solved the problem within 18 months. Why are they not doing it to the same? Because they've taken the pharmaceuticals and they've replaced it with psychotropics.
Right.
And because for the simple fact that the VA and Big Pharma, AstraZeneca, go down a list of all these, Glaxo, Wellcome, all of them, they all have an unholy relationship with these people. There's an organization called Devi that operated under a name called, but they were operating under another name because they got sued into oblivion and had to change their name. But, they were testing on the prison population in the state of Kentucky, these opioids. And when the state of Kentucky said, you're no longer allowed to test on these individuals, who did they go to next? It was the veterans. The VHA opened the door for them to come in and start testing these medicines within that cohort. So, these are not new problems. These are the relationships that all these organizations have with this cohort of 9-some million people that looks like the VA just sells off whenever they have an opportunity.
Adam just lost the power for a second, but it sounds like he's logging back in.
Right on.
Well, thanks for the work you're doing, Tim. Back in the day when I was running a nonprofit, we were challenging the VA because in the manual, they weren't offering EMDR therapy because they had this alliance with University of Minnesota for the behavioral techniques that they created, right? And so they were limiting one of the highest percentage therapies that we were offering locally, but then there was blocks for funding. It actually heals people. And so we had this campaign to stop that. And it worked eventually, but boy, that's a big ship to turn.
Yeah. We see this with HBOT, right? Hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. This form of therapy has an extraordinary means of addressing soft tissue damage, brain damage, TBI, CTE, PTS, all these different ailments that are very specific to the global war on terror veteran due to IEDs, concussions, explosions, all these different exposures. But we don't want to give the veteran that access in the VHA. In fact, Paul, what we want to do is we want to restrict their capabilities of getting access to hyperbarics to the tune that nearly 750,000 veterans have lost their life after amputations due to diabetic foot ulcers that would have saved their life if they would have had access to this within the first year of that amputation. But we deny them that, and then they die, and we don't have to pay out on those benefits. 750,000 veterans have lost their lives to that. That is just like, what are we doing? Like, do we not value human life anymore?
Yeah. Sorry, I lost power. Let's wrap up. A quick fun fact. I got to get this out. There's a little something you put in the notes here of something you did prior, had to do with wrestling. So tell us that, we'll wrap up.
I've been involved in a lot of crazy things over the years here at Grunt Style. I like to think of myself as a disruptor and trying to always get in front of a camera. Well, during COVID, there was a moment in time where that presented itself in a very unique circumstance. There was a former Green Beret that had reached out to us and was interested in a professional wrestling career. I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, what do you want from us? And, kind of danced around that subject for a little bit. And, it started to get a little bit more serious. And I said, well, okay, what does this really mean? So there was an opportunity. So I put together this tag team and started working in these high schools around Phoenix, Arizona, doing these little small time shows that then took us to Salt Lake City and then finally to Jacksonville, Florida, where we participated in AEW and made wrestling primetime, wrestling on national television as the Violence of Action. It was myself as the ringside manager. We had a Green Beret and a Army combat engineer as the two wrestlers. And it was quite fantastic. Paul, Big Show called one of our matches with Tony Schiavone. And it was really cool. So we did 3 appearances on national television as the Violence of Action.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Tim.
Technical difficulties.
Having some issues on the other end. Let me see if he can hop on. There we go.
All right, one more time.
Again. You missed the story. You're going to have to catch the replay, Adam. You missed the story.
We'll probably lose power here, but Tim, want to thank you for joining. Love Grunt Style, love the mission. Anyway, House of Bricks can help you out. Anyone listening out there, check out Grunt Style. And they're actually cool clothes. So there are mission-based initiatives out there that have shirts and clothing. It's great stuff. Even my teenage boys like it. We're throwing some orders in. So really appreciate what you're doing. Great business, but an even better purpose. And we want to come alongside you guys in any way that weekend to just save that one person, right? That's what I
That's
tell
right.
people all the time. I never wanted my name in lights. I don't care about followers or views, but there's one person out there listening that this is the time they need to hear that there's someone that's been in their situation that needs help. Make the phone call. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. A lot of people have been where you may be. Make the call, get help, get connected to a community.
I think we lost him again.
It's now your show, Tim.
Well, guys, welcome to Grunt Style. Hey, guys, in all honesty, great show. And I really appreciate Adam and the House of Bricks for bringing me on. Paul, thank you as well. I want to thank Evan Guzman for making the connection, another great friend of the brand. And for everybody listening, Grunt Style is, you find us at gruntstyle.com. You can find the Grunt Style Foundation at gruntstylefoundation.org and all the things that we're doing in the community to bring change. And listen, like, if it's not Grunt Style, you can find another company that is out there doing amazing and incredible things. We are living in a time in America that sitting on your hands is no longer an option. So get off your fat, lazy ass and go do some great stuff. And that's all that I think we're expecting here in America is a little bit of a revitalization of hard work and good effort. And we can get ourselves back into a place of prominence.
Well said, Tim. Thanks a lot. Thanks for everyone who joined. We'll be sending out highlights of this and ways to contribute to what Tim is working hard on, and hope everybody supports. Thanks for your time, Tim. We'll be in touch.
7-5, guys.
Thanks for listening to the House of Bricks podcast, where founders and veterans share how to test, fail, learn, and grow. If you want to go deeper, head to houseofbricks.substack.com. That's where you'll find the Startup X entrepreneurship course, interviews, and veteran roundtable discussions. And if you're a veteran looking to lower monthly bills or create financial runway for your next mission, visit houseofbricks.io to connect with VA loan and refinancing resources through our trusted partner, Sintra Mortgage. Everything we do is designed to help you keep building, brick by brick.